she found a Lakota warrior with arrow in his back. Dawn came with war paint at her door. The sun was already sinking when she noticed something strange near the tall grass behind her small cabin. The land was quiet in that uneasy way that often came before nightfall on the frontier. Birds had gone silent. Even the wind seemed unsure whether to move. She had lived alone long enough to know when the land was trying to warn her. At first she thought it was an animal. A deer, maybe, or a fallen tree branch shaped by shadows. But then she saw movement, slow, uneven, like someone trying not to be seen. Her heart tightened. People did not wander this far unless they were lost, desperate, or running from something. She stayed where she was, one hand resting against the doorframe. Every lesson she had learned out here came back to her at once. Do not rush. Do not assume. Do not turn your back. The frontier did not forgive mistakes. The figure collapsed before reaching the fence line. She stood frozen, counting her breaths. The sky was turning orange and purple, and the last light of day stretched long shadows across the ground. If she did nothing, night would take over soon. Out here, night decided who lived and who did not. She moved closer, step by careful step. That was when she saw him clearly. He was a Lakota man, lying face down, his body still except for shallow breathing. His clothes were torn and dusty, and dark stains marked the fabric near his back. An arrow was lodged there, angled deep enough that she knew pulling it out without care could end his life. She swallowed hard. Everything she had been taught told her to turn away. Helping him could cost her everything. Her safety, her home, her life. Stories spread fast out here, and mercy was often misunderstood. People vanished for less, but leaving him there would mean certain death. She looked around, half expecting someone else to appear. No one did. The land remained still, as if waiting for her choice. She knelt beside him, close enough now to hear his breathing. It was uneven, strained, but steady. He was alive. Strong, too. Even wounded, his body showed the marks of long endurance. Scars earned over time, not recklessness. Her hands trembled. She pressed them together to steady herself. "I don't know why you're here," she whispered, though she knew he could not hear her. "But I won't leave you." It took all her strength to move him. Every small sound made her flinch, afraid it would carry across the land. She dragged him inch by inch toward the barn behind her cabin, using the tall grass as cover. The arrow stayed in place, a terrible reminder that time was not on their side. When she finally managed to get him inside, she shut the door and leaned against it, breathless. The barn smelled of hay and old wood. It was not clean, but it was hidden. That would have to be enough. She lit a small lamp and examined the wound as carefully as she could. She had some knowledge, enough to clean and bind, enough to recognize danger. But this was serious. Removing the arrow would require patience and luck. She decided not to try yet. Instead, she cleaned around the wound and worked to stop the bleeding. All the while, her mind raced with fear. If someone came looking for him, they would come here. Tracks were hard to hide completely, and if they found her sheltering him, she did not let herself finish the thought. Hours passed slowly. Outside, darkness settled over the land like a heavy blanket. The man stirred once, his eyes opening just enough to reveal deep awareness, even in pain. He did not speak. He only watched her, calm and alert, as if measuring her intentions. She spoke softly, though she knew he might not understand her words. "You're safe for now," she said. "I'll do what I can." His gaze never left her face. There was no fear in his eyes. Only caution, and something else, discipline maybe. The kind that came from a life where trust was rare, and survival depended on control. She realized then that he was not just someone who had been hurt. He was someone who had lived through danger before. Near midnight, she finally sat back, exhausted. She had done all she could without making things worse. The arrow remained, but the bleeding had slowed. He slept lightly, breathing still shallow but steadier than before. She stepped outside for a moment, scanning the land. The moon was bright, revealing the wide openness that had once felt freeing and now felt terrifying. Any movement could mean trouble. Nothing stirred. Still, she did not sleep. She stayed awake, listening to every sound, the creak of wood, the call of distant animals, the soft rhythm of the man's breathing behind her. Her mind kept returning to one question she could not escape. Who would come looking for him? By the time the sky began to lighten, she was already standing. Dawn came slowly, pale and cold. It painted the land in soft gray, revealing tracks she had hoped were hidden. Footprints, drag marks, signs that told a clear story to anyone who knew how to read the ground. Her chest tightened. Then she heard it. Not one sound, but many. Soft, deliberate steps, not rushed, not careless. The kind of movement that spoke of confidence and purpose. She turned toward the door. Shadows appeared first, then shapes. Figures standing just beyond the edge of the clearing. Lakota warriors, their faces marked for war, their presence silent but powerful. They did not shout. They did not threaten. They waited. She understood then that the night of mercy had ended. Whatever she had done, whatever she had risked, would now be answered at her door. The morning air felt heavier than the night before. She could sense it the moment the first light spread across the land, the kind of stillness that came before something important happened. The warriors remained outside, unmoving, as if time itself had slowed around them. She did not step out right away. Instead, she turned back toward the barn. The Lakota man was awake now. His eyes followed her as she approached, sharp despite the pain he must have been feeling. He tried to move, but his body resisted him. She gently raised her hand, signaling him to stay still. "They're not ready," she said softly. He watched her carefully, then slowly relaxed. His trust surprised her. He had no reason to believe she meant him no harm, yet here he was, lying still in a stranger's shelter. She checked the wound again. The bleeding had not returned, but the arrow remained a threat. Leaving it too long could cause infection. Removing it too soon could be worse. She felt trapped between two bad choices, just as she felt trapped by the men waiting outside. She took a deep breath and made a decision. She stepped out of the barn and closed the door behind her. The warriors stood in a loose half-circle, far enough away to show restraint, close enough to show they were not afraid. Their faces were calm, painted with symbols that told stories she could not read. Their eyes were fixed on her, studying every movement. She raised her hands slowly, palms open. "I found him injured," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart was pounding. "I helped him. That's all."
They did not answer right away. They did not answer right away.
One man stepped forward. He was older than the others, his movements controlled, his presence commanding without force. He spoke in a low voice, words she did not understand, but his tone carried weight. This was someone they listened to. She gestured toward the barn. "He's alive," she said. "But he needs time." The older man looked past her toward the building. Then he nodded once. A small movement, but meaningful. Another man approached, younger, his eyes burning with urgency. He spoke sharply, his words quick. The older man raised his hand, stopping him. The tension between them was clear. Whatever had happened before the Lakota man was injured was not simple. She realized then that the arrow in his back might not have come from outsiders at all. Conflicts did not always come from one side. The land held many unfinished stories. The older man spoke again, slower this time. He pointed to the barn, then to his chest, then to the horizon. She understood enough. They wanted to take him. They wanted to leave. She shook her head gently. "Not yet." The younger man's posture stiffened. Murmurs passed through the group. She stood her ground, even though fear pressed hard against her ribs. "If you move him now, he may not survive," she said. "I won't stop you, but I won't lie to you." Silence followed. The older man studied her face, searching for something. He must have seen it. The truth, the exhaustion, the resolve. Finally, he gave a short command. The warriors relaxed slightly. They were not leaving, but they were no longer preparing to act. They would wait. Hours passed in a careful balance. She went back and forth between the barn and the cabin, bringing water, food, clean cloth. The Lakota man spoke little, but when he did, his voice was low and controlled. He pointed to the arrow, then to the sky, then held up 2 fingers. She guessed he was marking time, 2 days maybe. She nodded. "I'll do my best." As the day wore on, she learned small things about him without words. He endured pain without complaint. He watched everything. Even resting, he was alert. This was someone trained to survive, someone who had responsibility beyond himself. At one point, the older warrior entered the barn. He moved slowly, respectfully. He knelt beside the injured man and spoke to him in quiet tones. The injured man responded just as quietly. She stood back, giving them space. When the older man turned to her, he placed his hand over his heart and bowed his head slightly. It was not gratitude spoken aloud, but it was clear enough. Later, when the sun began to lower, she made the hardest decision yet. The arrow had to come out. She prepared carefully, cleaning her tools and her hands. The injured man watched her, his expression calm. He did not resist when she explained with gestures what she needed to do. The older warrior remained nearby, steady and silent. She worked slowly, focusing on every movement, every breath. When it was done, she pressed cloth against the wound and waited. Time stretched. Then the bleeding slowed. Relief washed over her so strongly that she nearly sat down. She cleaned and bound the wound again, more securely this time. The Lakota man's breathing steadied, his eyes closed, exhaustion finally claiming him. That night no one slept deeply. The warriors kept watch outside. She stayed near the barn listening. The land seemed calmer, as if it had accepted the fragile peace formed there. Before dawn, the injured man woke again. He looked at her, then reached out and placed his hand briefly over hers. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight. Trust, respect, a shared understanding that did not need words. By morning, the older warrior returned. He spoke softly, then looked at her with a seriousness that made her straighten. She knew then that this moment would not end when they left. Choices like hers never did. When they finally prepared to move, they did so carefully, lifting the injured man with practiced skill. He looked back once, meeting her eyes. She nodded, holding back emotion she did not fully understand. As they disappeared into the land, she stood alone again. But she was not the same person who had found a wounded man in the grass. She knew now that mercy carried consequences, and that dawn, when it came again, would not be quiet. After they left, the land felt strangely empty. The sounds of movement faded into the distance, and the open space around her cabin returned to stillness. But it was not the same kind of quiet as before. This silence carried memory. It carried weight. She stood there longer than she meant to, watching the place where they had disappeared. Only when the sun rose higher did she finally turn back toward her cabin. Inside, everything looked ordinary. The table, the chair, the small window that let in the morning light. But she felt like someone had quietly shifted the world while she was not looking. She tried to return to her daily work. She swept the floor. She gathered water. She fed the animals. Her hands moved through familiar motions, but her thoughts stayed elsewhere. Every sound made her pause. Every shadow caught her eye. By midday, she noticed riders in the distance. They were not Lakota. Her body reacted before her mind did. She stood still, watching as the figures grew clearer. Settlers, armed, riding with purpose. Her heart sank. They stopped near her fence. One man dismounted and called out to her. His voice was sharp, demanding. She stepped outside. They asked questions. Had she seen anyone pass through? Had she heard anything during the night? Their eyes scanned her land, reading the ground, noticing signs she wished she could erase. She answered carefully. Truthfully, but not fully. She had seen nothing unusual. She lived alone. Nights were quiet. They exchanged looks. One of them noticed the barn door. Another pointed at the ground. Tracks. Signs of recent movement. The tension tightened like a rope pulled too far. The man who seemed to be in charge stepped closer. His voice lowered. He warned her that danger was spreading, that alliances were shifting, that people needed to choose sides. She met his eyes. "I choose to survive," she said calmly. That answer did not satisfy them. They searched the area briefly, but found nothing they could prove. After a while, they mounted their horses and left, though not without warning glances back at her cabin. When they were gone, she leaned against the door, shaking. She knew then that helping the wounded man had not ended anything. It had only placed her between worlds. Days passed, slow and uneasy. At night she dreamed of footsteps outside her door, of painted faces in the dark, of voices she could not understand but somehow felt deeply. She woke often, listening. Then, one morning, something new appeared. A single mark near the edge of her land, small, easy to miss. But deliberate. She had seen it before, carved into wood near old trails. It was a sign, not a threat, a message. They had not forgotten her. That knowledge brought comfort and fear in equal measure. Later that week, another visitor arrived, a trader she recognized, traveling between settlements and tribes. He brought news, talk of rising tension, of misunderstandings turning into fights, of one Lakota scout who had survived an ambush and carried important knowledge. But she said nothing. But she listened. The trader mentioned that some believed a woman had saved the scout's life, that her actions had caused debate among leaders. Some saw her as a risk. Others saw her as proof that not all settlers were the same. The story was spreading. That night she sat by the window, watching the sky darken. She wondered if she had done the right thing, if kindness was enough when the world demanded loyalty. Just before dawn she heard movement again. This time it was not distant. She stepped outside slowly. They stood at the edge of the clearing, fewer than before, no raised weapons, no urgency, only presence. The older warrior stepped forward. With him was another man, younger, carrying himself with quiet importance. His posture was careful, his eyes observant. She recognized him, the wounded man. He was walking now, slowly, supported by a staff. His wound was still healing, but he was alive, stronger than before. Her breath caught. They stopped several steps away. The older warrior spoke briefly. The injured man stepped forward on his own. He placed something on the ground between them, a small object, carefully made, a sign of thanks, of acknowledgement. She did not move right away. Then she nodded and accepted it. They spoke through gesture and simple shared words. He explained as best he could that his survival had changed things. The message he carried had reached his people. It had prevented a mistake, a conflict that would have cost many lives. Her simple choice had mattered, but it had also marked her. The older warrior spoke then, his voice serious. He warned her that the land was shifting, that her kindness had made her visible. Some would respect it, others would not. The injured man looked at her steadily. He touched his chest, then pointed to her cabin, then to the horizon. He was saying that bonds, once formed, did not disappear. They left again before the sun fully rose. She watched them go, knowing this goodbye was different. It was not an ending. It was a turning. From that day on, people treated her differently. Some avoided her. Some whispered. Some watched too closely. But others came quietly, seeking help, information, safety for a night. She gave what she could. She learned that courage was not loud, that peace was often built by people who never appeared in stories. That standing between sides meant never fully belonging to either. And still, she did not regret what she had done. Because she had seen what mercy could change. Life did not slow down after that. If anything, it moved faster, as if the land itself had decided there was no more time to hesitate. News traveled in pieces, never complete, never clear. One person said there would be peace. Another said trouble was coming. The truth lived somewhere in between, shifting every day. She learned to listen more than she spoke. People came to her cabin for different reasons. Some needed water. Some needed rest. Some only wanted to see her face and decide for themselves if the stories were true. She offered kindness when she could and distance when she had to. Trust, she learned, was something that grew slowly and could break all at once. The Lakota warrior did not return often, but when he did, he never came, unannounced. There were signs. Small signals left near the tree line. Marks that told her when to expect company and when to stay inside. When he arrived, he was stronger each time. The wound no longer slowed him, though it had changed him. Pain had a way of doing that. It sharpened awareness. It stripped away waste. They spoke more now. Still limited by language, but understanding had its own rhythm. He told her about his role, not in words but in meaning. He was a messenger, a protector of paths between people who no longer trusted each other. What he carried was not just information, it was responsibility. He told her that the conflict that wounded him had not been simple. It had not been one side against another. It had been fear colliding with fear. Old promises remembered differently. Borders drawn without agreement. He told her that her choice had forced others to stop and think. That knowledge made her uneasy. "I didn't do it to change anything," she said once. "I just didn't want someone to die." He nodded. That answer mattered to him. But the world did not care about intentions as much as it cared about results. Tension grew again. She could feel it in the air, in the way animals moved, in the way voices lowered when people spoke of the future. Patrols increased. Meetings were held behind closed doors. One evening, the warrior arrived later than usual. His expression was serious, his movements tight. He warned her without fear, but with honesty. Some settlers believed she was sharing information. Some believed she had chosen a side. Some wanted her removed from the land altogether. At the same time, some Lakota feared she would be punished for what she had done. That her kindness would bring harm to her instead of peace. She listened quietly. "What should I do?" she asked. He did not answer right away. Then he said something simple. "Stand where you are." That night, she did not sleep. Just before dawn, riders approached again, more than before. Settlers, organized and determined. They stopped outside her land and waited, as if expecting her to come out.
She did. The leader spoke first.
He accused her openly, said she was helping the wrong people, that she was risking everyone's safety, that choices had consequences. She did not argue. She told them exactly what she had done. She had helped a wounded man. Nothing more, nothing less. She had not given secrets. She had not carried messages. "I saved a life," she said. "If that's a crime, then say it plainly." Some of the men looked away. Others did not. Before anything else could happen, movement appeared beyond the clearing. Lakota riders, calm, controlled. Not prepared for attack, but not afraid either. The two groups faced each other across her land. The space between them felt fragile enough to break with a single wrong word. The warrior stepped forward. He spoke clearly, slowly, choosing his words with care. He explained why he had been wounded, what mistake had nearly been made, how information, once corrected, had prevented greater loss. He told them that her actions had saved time, and time had saved lives. Silence followed. The settler leader finally spoke. His voice was quieter now. He did not apologize, but he did not accuse her again either. Both sides stepped back. Not peace, but not conflict. That was the best anyone could manage. After that day, her cabin became something else. Not a home exactly, not a meeting place.
But a marker, a reminder that lines did not always hold.
She stayed. She could have left. Many told her she should, but she believed that leaving would turn her choice into something it was not meant to be. She continued her life. She helped when she could. She refused when she had to. She learned to live with being watched. The warrior visited one last time before winter. He thanked her properly then, in words, in meaning, and in silence. He told her he would be sent far away, to places where the land changed shape and the air felt different. She nodded. "Be careful," she said. He smiled slightly. "I learned that here, when he left." She knew she would not see him again. Winter came hard that year. Snow buried tracks. Silence returned, but it was a different silence now, one that held memory instead of fear. Winter slowly released the land, though it did not do so kindly. Snow melted into thick mud, and the rivers ran fast and cold. The world felt raw, as if it were waking from a long and uneasy sleep. She endured it the same way she had endured everything else, one day at a time. Her cabin still stood, weathered but firm, just like her. People passed by less often now. Some had moved on. Some had learned to keep their distance. Others still stopped when they needed help, though they spoke carefully, as if every word might travel further than intended. She had become a quiet landmark, a woman who lived between stories. Someone people mentioned but rarely explained fully. Spring brought color back to the land, and with it, reflection. She spent long mornings outside, repairing what winter had damaged. As she worked, she thought often of the man she had saved, of how close everything had come to ending before it ever truly began, of how one moment had stretched outward, touching more lives than she would ever know. She did not think of herself as brave. She had simply acted. Sometimes she wondered what history would say, if it said anything at all. She suspected it would remain silent. Stories like hers often did. The land remembered more than people did. One afternoon, a group of travelers stopped by. Among them was a young woman, curious and open, asking questions without fear. She asked how she managed to live alone, how she stayed safe. She smiled gently. "I pay attention," she said. "And I treat people like people." The young woman nodded, not fully understanding yet, but one day she would. Years passed. The borders shifted again. New rules came, new names for old places. The tension never fully disappeared, but it softened in places. Hard lines blurred. Trade resumed along certain paths. Messages moved more carefully now. She grew older, strong in different ways. Sometimes at dawn she would see distant riders on the horizon. She never knew if they were passing through or watching. She did not ask. She had learned that some questions did not need answers. One morning she found a familiar mark near the tree line, weathered now, almost faded. She stood there for a long time. He had not returned, but the sign remained. That was enough. Late one evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat outside her cabin and listened to the land. The wind moved through the grass. Birds settled for the night. The world felt balanced in a way it rarely did. She thought of how close she had come to saying no, to turning away, to choosing safety over compassion. She did not blame the version of herself that had hesitated. Fear was honest, but she was grateful for the version of herself that had knelt beside a wounded stranger and stayed. She understood now that courage was not something people carried with them. It arrived only when needed, and it often looked like something else, like kindness or stubbornness, or simply refusing to walk away. When the time came for her to leave the land, it was quiet. No drama. No witnesses. She passed her cabin on to another family, people who needed a place to begin again. They asked her if there was anything they should know. She paused, then said, "Listen to the land, and remember that every choice leaves a mark." They did not fully understand. But one day, perhaps they would. As she walked away for the last time, she did not look back. Some stories were not meant to be revisited. They were meant to be carried forward. And though no book would record her name, no monument would stand where her cabin once did, her choice lived on, in the lives that had been spared, in the moments of pause before conflict, in the quiet knowledge that even in the hardest times, someone had chosen mercy. Because history is not only written by those who fight, sometimes it is shaped by those who open a door. tend a wound, and stand their ground when the world demands they choose a side.